All right, here we are with video number 6 on chapter 2. Today we're going to talk about more of the resistance in the North and some of the things that possibly were viewed as a start to the Civil War. And then we're going to talk about, again, another issue with states wanting to, or territories, I should say, wanting to become part of the United States at this point. So, we'll first start with the further resistance. So last thing we talked about was something known as the Fugitive Slave Act. And many Northerners, they were against it. It was a part of the Compromise of 1850 as far as California being entered into the United States. But nonetheless, Northerners, a lot of people did not like it. And the reason that they justified their defiance, they said it was based upon their moral character. And there was a quote that I found this morning when I was going through the reading by Henry David Thoreau that I thought kind of really exemplifies what this means. And that is, he wrote, "If the law requires you to be an agent of injustice to another, then I say break the law." So as far as that injustice, again, slaves or people who were free were unable to give a testimony. They were unable to say if they were free. They were unable to pretty much give any witnesses or anything like that. That would be upon their side. But anyways, the Northerners, they are going to reject this law in many ways because they do think that it is biased and that there's no way that it should be legal. So that's going to be the first part. Some of the other further resistance. This first one, most of you have heard of. That is the Underground Railroad. Now, this was led by Harriet Tubman, and the next slide I'll show you exactly what that's all going to look like. But it's a route of secret transportation that's going to take place at night for slaves to be able to run away, to either go into Mexico, to go south, or head north to go into Canada. But this was the biggest, probably the most important aspect of that resistance. Of people actively trying to get to freedom, actively trying to get to safety. And it wasn't just people like Harriet Tubman who were conductors, who were leading these missions at night. There were a lot of other people that were just as important. And the next two people are listed as some of those very important people. The first one is Levi Coffin. Now, Levi Coffin, he was very well off. He had quite a bit of money. Now, he allowed runaways to stay at his house for safety. And this was done in a couple of different ways. There was a secret message. Sometimes they would hang like a red blanket over the porch. Sometimes they would leave the light on at night. But that was supposed to signify, yes, it's safe to go here. No, I'm being watched. But nonetheless, Levi Coffin allowed about 3,300 African Americans to stay at his houses along the route. And as far as that's concerned, that is a very dangerous thing. If he is caught doing that, it is almost certain that he is going to be sentenced to death. For that. But Levi Coffin is yet another one of those examples of very famous conductors. And then the next one on there is Harriet Beecher Stowe. And her role was a little bit different. She was kind of like Levi Coffin. She would allow runaway slaves to stay at her house, but she took a different role on that aspect. And what I mean by that, when these runaway slaves, when they would go to his house, or her house, they would tell her the stories, the atrocities, the horrible conditions that slaves would have, and she collected that all together and wrote a book known as Uncle Tom's Cabin. Now, this book, as it says on there, talked about exactly, maybe not word for word, but the many different examples that she heard from runaway slaves about what life was like. Now, Northerners, as I said, a lot of people were defiant based on the moral character. There was also Northerners that were against abolition because they thought it would be a threat to society. Now, once they read this book and realized and saw exactly what life was like, many people from the North, they started to believe in emancipation. They started believing in getting rid of slavery. Now, people in the South, they thought it was a lie. They said, there's no way. This is all made up. She's lying. In the South, it was illegal to have this book. If you had it, you could possibly go to jail for it. They would not print it. They would not deliver it there. So it almost would have to be smuggled into the South. And, we're talking about a book here, but it had such a total impression upon the people. This is actually viewed as by historians, one of the causes of the Civil War. And it's kind of hard to imagine that a book is going to be able to have that much impact, that much of a cause going into the war. But based upon these atrocities, it definitely is going to be an example of that there. And these next two slides, this first one here on the top left, I think, is a really cool picture because here it just looks like a regular cabinet, but really what it's It's a part of the Underground Railroad. It's a way for people to be able to go in there, and it's a way for people to be able to get hidden. And then here's just an overall generalized map of the Underground Railroad. As you can see, people in the south, southwest part, they're going to start to head to Mexico. You see in the north, they're going to try to start to head towards Canada. But those are just a couple examples about what the Underground Railroad was like and the route that they had to take. I mean, you can see here, going from Georgia all the way heading north to Canada, it's going to be a long route. Traveling by night, maybe only a couple miles a day. Very dangerous, very scary mission. Now, yet again, more states want to become a part of the Union. Maybe I'll kind of go back here and show you. These unorganized territories, this is going to be a big issue here. And because they're unorganized, eventually they want to become a part of the United States. They want to become an actual state. Now, Oregon is admitted into the Union. And once they're admitted into the Union, the next thought is we need to have a transcontinental railroad. And as the name is going to apply, transcontinental, it's going to start from the East Coast and on the West Coast, because people on the West Coast, they still need the supplies. A lot of those supplies they cannot get on the West Coast. Therefore, they need it to be able to be brought from the East over to their side. Now, as always, not everyone's going to agree. And what I mean by that, where should the railroad start? We know it's going to start in the east, but should it start in the north? Should it start in the south? Obviously, the people in the north, they think absolutely it needs to start in the north. People in the south, absolutely, they think it needs to start there. And Stephen Douglas is going to be kind of this first person to characterize and this first person to kind of fight for it to be in the north. But one of the requirements, they want to make sure while they create this railroad that it is going to go through as many states as possible. If it goes through the south, odds are part of it is going to have to go through Mexico. Part of it's going to go through unorganized territory. So his big fight, his big push at this point, create Nebraska, create another state. If he is able to do that, it's going to be able to go through the north. Now, one of the other issues that we've talked quite a bit about is the balance. The Senate in the South and in the North, I guess you could say the same thing, they want to make sure that they are even. That they are 15 free states, 15 slave states. Now, he is going to fight, and when I say he, I'm talking about Stephen Douglas. He is fighting for something known as popular sovereignty. And what that refers to, popular sovereignty, all that means is the people, they vote. The majority decide. And by popular sovereignty, he's talking that people in the states, Nebraska and Kansas, they are going to vote. And they are going to vote whether or not they think it should be a free state, whether or not it should be a slave state. Now, Nebraska, there's really not too big of an issue here. Because it's so far north, yes, eventually the Missouri Compromise is going to be repealed as partially unconstitutional. But nonetheless, Nebraska is going to be admitted as a free state. And as it says on there, Kansas as a slave state. That's supposedly what the plan is going to be. But again, the issue here is going to be within popular sovereignty. And within that popular sovereignty, we get a term known as Bleeding Kansas. It's almost, I guess you could say it in a way, it's kind of like a mini civil war that's going to be taking place here in Kansas with popular sovereignty. So many Northerners, they know that they are going to vote. They know that they're going to have this popular sovereignty in this state. So the Northerners, they hurry into Kansas. They try to get there as soon as possible. And they go there simply because they want to vote. And once they vote, they are going to vote for an anti-slavery majority. So these Northerners are trying to get into Kansas, and they're going to make sure that it's going to be admitted as a free state. Now, if you think that's going to happen with Northerners, Southerners, they're going to do the exact same thing. So a lot of people from Missouri, they are known as border ruffians. They're crossing the border. They're trying to rough people up. And they cross the border to vote illegally. They have no intention of staying there. They don't want to become citizens of Kansas. They simply want to go there to make sure that there is going to be a pro-slavery majority. And there's a term that's kind of almost still used today. Vote early, vote often. Just like today, a lot of people for general election, whether it's the presidency or not, a lot of people don't vote. So there's a term to kind of go out, vote early so you get it done with. But at this time period, vote early, vote often meant you could go to one polling district, get to the next one as soon as you're done voting there, and kind of keep going on from place to place. Now, in the end, supposedly once the ballots are casted, and the border ruffians and the people who are from the north are fighting with each other, there's actually like mini battles taking place. Supposedly there is a pro-slavery majority. However, both sides create their own constitution. Both sides claim that they are winners. Both sides claim that they're victorious. But a huge issue is both sides create their own constitution. So in Kansas, we have two separate governments at this time period. Which one do you follow? So eventually the federal government is going to have to come and make that final decision here. So we'll stop here today, ending with Bleeding Kansas. And again, make sure you're checking your notes. Make sure you're getting that discussion question done.